there's only so much that you can band-aid. There's only so much you can work around without things getting to be extremely complicated, extremely manual, expensive, and really prone to errors.
89% of leaders are expected to be strategic advisors, but 70% of them say their stack holds that back.
It used to be that our team spent hundreds or sometimes even thousands of hours a month reading through these contracts. We now load all the contracts in every month into a tool, and it comes back, extremely quickly within minutes. This is really a time where we as finance leaders, we need to lean in.
You surveyed nearly 1,000 finance leaders. Was there anything that surprised you?
Welcome to Tech Finance. I'm your host, Sasha Orloff, repeat founder and current CEO of Puzzle, and self-professed finance nerd. On this show, we dive into the pulse of B2B fintech, from newly funded startups transforming the office of the CFO to major industry shifts, deals, and partnerships that are reshaping how we think about finance. You'll hear the most important developments, essential analysis, and of course, AI innovations. This show is brought to you by Puzzle and the Turpentine Podcast Network. Let's dive in.
All right, welcome everybody. So for season 2, we are focused on accounting and technology. And so today is a special episode for 2 reasons. One, Zuora is just one of the original and leading accounting software companies, period. But 2, they just published a huge report called the Modern Finance Leader. So some of the insights we'll get into, 90% of finance leaders say they're getting pressure to be more strategic. And let's talk about one of the reasons that they're holding them back. Just a hint, it's software. That's why we got Todd here today. 93% say AI is part of their strategic priority. Well, let's learn a little bit more about what's holding back. And not surprising, one of the key challenges that 3 out of 4 leaders say is complex revenue models that are trying to be adapted to legacy software and transactional businesses. So I think this is going to be a killer episode. And why? Well, Todd is a storied finance leader. And so we talk about names that everybody's heard of. Oracle, VMware, SAP, and now Zuora CFO. So I'm excited to dive right in. Todd, welcome to the show.
Sasha, thanks a lot for having me. Glad to be here.
Cool. All right, to start us off, what inspired this report?
It's interesting. Here at Zora, we primarily sell a lot to CFOs and CAOs. I probably talk to 100, of my peers every year. And, one of the things that we kept hearing over and over is the fact that the technology stack that so many companies had was turning out to be a disadvantage to them, or was not allowing them to bring products to market. It was really interesting. It was a couple months ago. I was with the CFO, about $1 billion company. And he told me something which is absolutely amazing. Was first of all, is I think they had 40 engineers that are working on their own home billing system. And I'm like going, oh my goodness. And these engineers were not a cheap location. And I was like, oh wow, this is a ton of money that you're spending. And the second thing he said was, my backlog to get a new SKU out is at least 6 months. I have this huge backlog. And it's just surprising to me how often I hear that, you think about it, you've got product, you're ready to go. And here's the finance team that says, I can't even get it up so we can quote it. I don't know how to bill it. I don't know how to recognize the revenue. And it's a huge problem. And I think we wanted to sit there and say, okay, we've heard enough of this. And is it, hey, are these just anecdotes and these happen to be the people that we're talking to and that become our customers? Or is it more pervasive? And I think what we found is, especially in the study, it's probably a lot more pervasive than what we thought. And the second thing is, the world's changing really quickly. And AI is a huge driver of that. And one of the things that we're also seeing, especially in the technology industry, is hey, people are certainly buying things on a subscription basis, but now people are buying things on a consumption basis. And I think AI is even going to allow you to buy things on a standpoint of what is the outcome? Did I get the outcome that I wanted? And I charge differently for that. And that again is providing a whole myriad of challenges for CFOs, chief accounting officers, and finance teams. And so that's really what gave us the desire to do the study. And I think we found some really interesting things on it.
Yeah, excited. So one of the things I think as we report evidence, so that you surveyed nearly 1,000 finance leaders. You have obviously been in finance or a CFO of some of the most successful storied companies of all times. Was there anything that surprised you in the data that came back?
I think the biggest thing that was a surprise to me is the fact that there were so many CFOs but just weren't engaged or weren't taking the lead in the technology decisions that were being made for their company. And when I think about this, the CFO has really got to be out there and able to say, okay, how do I adapt to this infrastructure? How do I have an infrastructure that's adapting to how we want to sell our products today? And this, is really true in tech. And you absolutely need to have the CFO and the CAO at the table when those decisions are made. And so I think that's one of the things that, surprised me when the data came back, especially in tech. You would expect that the CFO, would be much more aggressive and much more engaged.
And I'm guessing that relates a little bit to one of the sort of terms that you have in your thing called the modernization catch 22. Can you like unpack what that means?
Yeah. At the end of the day, I think finance teams and finance leaders, we're really practical folks. We figure out how to get things done. And too often than not, we band aid things. And look, that can work for temporary solutions. It can get you through a close or two. But I think one of the things that a lot of companies are getting to a point of, there's only so much that you can band aid. There's only so much you can work around without things getting to be extremely complicated, extremely manual, expensive, and really prone to errors. And so at some point in time, you've got to just rip off the band aid.
Exactly.
And I think this is where finance leaders need to say, all right, I'm going to prioritize, I'm going to fix this, and I'm going to invest in it. There's two types of investment. There's, first of all, there's the investment that I need to have for money to buy that tool and maybe anything else that comes with it is third party services. But more importantly, and probably the biggest constraint is their own teams. The teams are busy. They've got, ordinary course of business that needs to be done. And now the question is, how do I make time to not only get all of those things done, but spend all the time of putting in a new quote to cash system? And I think that's one of the biggest things that people continue to push off on.
Yeah. I think that feeds a little bit into this like strategic expectation versus sort of the reality of today's finance team. And so one of the stats in the paper was 89% of leaders are expected to be strategic advisors, but 70% of them say their staff holds that back. Is that gap growing, shrinking, and why do you think that is?
I think a big reason for that is the world has just got more complicated. When I started my career, you did one of two things. You sold a product, you sold a service, and it was done. And we think about it today. Now you can have a subscription. Now you can sit there and you can buy a pre commit. Now we're seeing people want to buy on a consumption model or they want to buy on an outcome. And all of these require different tools and technologies for how do you quote it? How do you meter it? How do you price it? How do you recognize the revenue? And it's just becoming a whole lot more complex. And not only that, you've got to be more engaged with not only understanding what the product cycles are and going to come out. So you're able to handle the operationalization of those new sales model, but you've also got to be able to sit there and work with your sales teams on how they're going to quote and how they're going to go to market and how they want to price and package it. The work's just become a whole lot more complicated, and you've got to have a bunch more variables than what we did in the last generation.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, to some degree, when you think about it, like I'm going to buy a trip from San Francisco to New York, and I'm buying a flight, and I'm buying a hotel, and I'm buying a car. That hasn't changed much, except maybe seats have gotten smaller on airplanes and less comfortable along the way, and food's gotten worse. But revenue models have gotten much more complicated, and capital allocation, like I have my in treasury because interest rates are here, and I have this other like newfangled thing. So I imagine reconciliations and RevRec become quite complicated. If you're a CFO listening right now and you're sort of nodding along, what do you say to them in sort of the reality of today's complex world?
I think in today's complex world, it's really important for you to make sure that you have the tools and the technology in place. The example that you gave, actually, there is a lot of difference in travel. If you think about that, where you may have discreetly bought your ticket, your hotel room, and your rental car, now you might sit there and say, oh, I've actually sold that as a bundle. And as you sold that as a bundle, now there becomes a complicated accounting on how do I allocate how much for the airfare? What do I allocate for the hotel? And what do I allocate for the car? And oh, by the way, if I bought it today, but I'm not flying until December, I can't recognize that revenue. I've got to hold that up as a liability and I've got to defer it until I deliver the service. So if you just think about your example there, Those are huge revenue challenges that teams face. And somebody's like, oh, how hard can that be? But if you think about that, and if you've got tens of thousands or hundred thousands of transactions like that a day or a month, it becomes extremely hard. And the last thing you want is a group of 20 some year olds on spreadsheets manually figuring that out, because it's absolutely a recipe for disaster on how you're accounting both your revenue and potential service liabilities in the future.
Fair point. Fair point. So, like, what do we do, right? Like, the reality isn't like software is making our lives easier as accounting and finance teams. It's actually making it harder. What are some of the either the findings from the report or just your recommendations, having been doing this for so many years?
I think one of the things that, we try to do here is we constantly take a look at where do we spend our time. And as I take a look at how I spend my time and my team time, and it can be really interesting. You take a look and it's like, oh my goodness, we spend this amount of time every month on this process. And really taking a look at how can we make that process more efficient? Are there things that we can stop doing? Are there things that we can automate? Are there things, quite frankly, the way we package and sell, does it make sense? Oftentimes one of the things that I find is what takes companies the longest to manually reconcile are things that maybe are 2 or 3% of their product catalog. And
Yeah.
so the question is, does it make sense to have that much variety in your product catalog when the cost to administer that is probably, leading to you having, suboptimal results?
Yeah, it's a good point, and it makes it hard. And I mean, I think even just adding to the complexity of this is now, like you said, is AI. So we've had this like I bought a thing, maybe had some services implementation. Now I might have a relationship with different tiers and different discounts. And then there's this growing trend of usage-based pricing for some sort of metered element or some sort of prepayment or post-payment. And now this whole new concept that AI and agents might be coming in and creating the stress of sort of a pay per outcome. We see this happening, and you kind of talk about this as the AI paradox, both in sort of investing in AI as teams, but also in like thinking about revenue models. What's your point of view on this?
I think the first thing is this is really a time where we as finance leaders, we need to lean in. Oftentimes when we are here, we sit there and we say, we want to be really conservative. We want to be thoughtful. We want to make sure something works. But I think this technology is so groundbreaking and so changing. This is really an opportunity where we need to be leaning in. I think we need to be thoughtful about it. I know on some of the areas where we're looking to use AI to improve processes or to get much more efficient, we're going to run things parallel. We want to absolutely make sure at the end of the day, in finance, we are a precision business. It's not close enough. We've got to be on the number every time. And so I think it's being thoughtful about it, but it is a place where we need to lean in and we need to invest. And I think about it like a home renovation. Nobody wants to sit there and go through and say, I want to rip my roof off and rip the kitchens and the bathroom off. But once you do that and you get through it, you're like, oh my goodness, why did I wait so long? This house is so much more functional. It's great having a bathroom that works the way I want it to, and the plumbing works, and all the kitchen is the way it wants to be. And I think, finance systems are the same way, and AI has a real opportunity to be a game changer for it. But it's something we absolutely, as finance leaders, need to be investing in, and we need to lean in.
Hey, we'll get back to the conversation in a moment after a word from our sponsors. All right. One of my favorite tools that I use and we use is Notion. Notion is used by thousands of startups around the world as their connected workspace for everything from engineering specs to new hire onboarding to fundraising. Notion has a special offer for listeners. 6 months of free Notion with unlimited AI, value of over $6,000. So you can access the limitless power of AI right inside of Notion to build and scale your company and team with one tool. Get 6 months free of Notion with unlimited AI, along with custom templates when you apply for notion.com/startups/puzzle. Once again, that's notion.com/startups/puzzle. Go for it. I think you all remember that sound. It's the dial-up. Why would startups still be using accounting software from the 1990s? It's like running your company on dial-up internet. It's like raising a Series A on a fax machine or pitching investors with a flip phone. You wouldn't build the next unicorn with outdated tech, so why are you still running your numbers on it? Puzzle is leading a new movement, an AI first ledger that eliminates the grunt work, updates in real time, and actually helps you make informed decisions. No more waiting, no more guessing, just the clarity you need it when speed matters. This isn't just accounting, it's the future of how businesses run. Join the movement today at puzzle.io.
How do you think about this as the CFO? Has it changed at all your hiring practices or how you encourage adoption with your team?
You know, we always are looking for people that are curious and they want to learn more. And I think one of the things that we're doing here at Zora is we're encouraging people, hey, let's start with small projects. What are things that we can work on? I know myself, I'm loading things into some of our AI different tools and finding out how can I become more efficient? How can I gather different pieces of information? I think one of the things that I've learned is I load stuff in, you end up having to ask very precise questions. And the more precise the question you ask, the better the output you get. And so it really has become a matter of let's start small, let's get people comfortable, let's experiment with it. The other thing that we're doing is we're working really close with our partners in IT, and they're helping us take a look at what are some of the new tools and technologies that are out there. And then we're encouraging people to get used to those and to be working with them. And so I think it's something that we have a real opportunity to do and an opportunity to get much more effective at doing our jobs.
Is there anything that you can think of, either a demo you saw online or in person, or a new technology that you guys adopted that kind of stands out to you that you want to give a shout out to?
I am really excited about a tool that we implemented here recently. And so we work in the enterprise software space. So we have relatively complicated contracts and there's customizations that are in each of those contracts. And guess what? Each of those customizations may result in an impact on how you recognize revenue. And, it used to be that our team spent hundreds or sometimes even thousands of hours a month reading through these contracts to understand, hey, is there something we need to modify in how we're recognizing the revenue? And I know that my revenue and billing teams were less than excited about spending these hundreds or thousands of hours doing it. We now load all the contracts in every month into a tool and it comes back, extremely quickly within minutes. Here's everything that's not standard, oftentimes with a recommendation on what we need to do. And we have now moved our revenue close down for about a day. That was something that was taking us 6, 7, 8 days. We're now down to getting it done in less than a day. And it's given my team a whole lot of time to do things that are forward looking, that are certainly exciting to them. And it's really allowing them to spend more time with our business partners and doing things rather than driving the business. It was super important. And we certainly need to get those contracts right. But being able to have a tool that does that has really been a game changer for that team. And I think it's something that we're going to see more and more opportunities that can happen.
I'm sure that's resonated with a lot of listeners, not only just our listeners, but the analysis that you guys did showed it. Over 80% of leaders say sort of the process of like understanding order to contract to cash is a major issue. So what do you say to them that are listening? How do they know when that is at a point where something needs to change?
I think there's a few things that when you say it needs to change. One is when it becomes an impediment to your business. Two, when you take a look at what is the speed that it takes you to get things done. We're not quite at a 3-day close. We're around a 4-day close or so. I'd like to be at a 3-day close. But the question becomes is when can you get yourself so you are able to not have your finance systems instead of being an enabler, it's a disabler or it's something that is slowing down your business.
When you think about all this AI and technology that's happening, what do you view? I mean, one way to look at it is it's slowing you down. Sometimes the gut reaction inside of companies, let's just take sort of a SaaS or enterprise company. One of the reactions is, well, let's just hire more people. What do you view as like the appropriate number of people for a business, or how to think about that, given some of the automation and AI that is happening that can help solve some of these problems?
The way I look at it, I don't know that we obviously do different benchmarks for different processes, whether it be our billing team, our cash collections team, our planning and reporting teams. But I think, more importantly, it goes back to the conversation we had earlier. Where do we spend the time and doing the work that we're doing? And what is that stuff that's rote and routine? And this is an area where you've got a huge opportunity to automate that. And usually what I found is, when you're automating that, that's really, really exciting for our employees because those are the things they don't get a lot of joy out of. And there are things that we've got to do, but they're also the things that don't move the business forward. They're not moving the needle on how we grow the business or how do we do something more efficiently or how do we spend more time on something that's really going to help out our business partners. And so I think if you can go through and identify those areas and figure out ways that you automate those or that your different technologies to get through those faster, it really opens up our people's time to work on those value added processes and those value added things. They provide more, that's more enjoyable for our employees. They're more excited to come to work. They have a better, or they certainly have a better outlook on their job. Our business partners love it because they're able to solve problems. And at the end of the day, the company gets a better result.
I think I want to come back to one of your answers from before and then coming back to the report is you talked a little bit about sort of the like we figure out solutions, like we come with a yes. I think a lot of the finance teams are thought of across an organization as being labeled the no department. What is it in either your leadership style or your expertise that helps build and cultivate sort of departments of yes?
I think that's a really great question, and I'm going to go back really early in my career. I was at a business unit. It was a startup within a large company, and we were really struggling on how to get the pricing right, and we didn't have any customers. We needed to lead in, and the guy who ran the business at one time says, Todd, if I don't sell something, you're not going to have anything to count, and that's really resonated with me for a long time. And at the end of the day, there are times we need to lean in. Nobody wants to take deals that aren't good deals economically for the company. Nobody wants to take deals where you can't recognize the revenue. And so I think it really comes into that. It's not a no, but it's yes. But what if we did it like this? What is the customer trying to accomplish? And I think it's a matter of finding business people or finance people that are looking for solutions, understanding what the problem is, and coming up to something that works for both parties. And if you can get a team that does that, that really makes all the difference in the world. And I think when I take a look at like my chief accounting officer and our deal desk team, they really do a great job at that. They look at this to say, you know what? We're all more successful when this business grows. Nobody wants this business to stay the same size or shrink. And so we're all incented to how do we grow the business? And quite frankly, how do we grow it in a way that's healthy? So I think if everybody's got those tools and you can have that communication back and forth, and it really also helps when you're working with your go-to-market team to say, the reason I don't want to do it like this is because it causes this to happen. And they're like, oh, I got it. I don't want to bring in bad business either. And so I think it really helps if you have that good communication and everybody understands, okay, here's the business problem we're trying to solve. And here's the way that we can solve it that helps both sides of the transaction.
Given that advice, let's put yourself in the shoes of two different finance leaders. Let's first start with that finance leader that's just stepping in the earliest days of a company. And you're having that same conversation with their team. It's like, hey, I want you to sell. I want more stuff to count. I want more complication. What is your advice to that first time finance leader that's stepping into the role for the first time in today's world? Maybe let's take a PLG to enterprise type of company, or they have some complicated contracts and they're still trying to figure out pricing. What's your advice to either Todd back in that day or that new finance leader today right now?
I think you've got, I mean, one of the things that you can get yourself overly concerned on is, well, what do we look like just today? And I think you've got to sit there and say, where do I want the company to be in 6, 12, 24 months? And really look at what are the objectives and goals that you're trying to solve down later on. And then start to, build your organization, whether it's your tools and technology, whether it's how you pipe, whether it's how you organize, but really look not where you are today, but where do you see yourself being in, you know, 12 or 24, 36 months out and making sure that you're building the agility in so that you can service what you need to be then. And I think, one of the things that I always say is, if I could predict what things were going to look like next year, I wouldn't be in this role. I would be doing where I'd be much more successful. And I don't think any of us, when you sit there and say, "Oh, I've got a 5 year plan," hey, we have a 5 year plan, but that's based on what we know today. And in 3 weeks, there's going to be a bunch of agreeable in that it change. And I think it's a good idea to have where you want to go, but it's also a good idea to be able to say, okay, I've got the ability to pivot. We've got the ability to maneuver and change as circumstances change, because I don't think any of us sitting here today are going to be able to say exactly with precision what is 5 years going to look like. And if there is one of us, I want to meet them and I want some advice on how we could be investing in other things other than my business.
Yeah, I mean, we're all at the mercy of whatever Sam Altman, Elon Musk, or Donald Trump tweets at any given time of the day and what the capabilities are. All right, let's now talk about that leader that is probably stuck into a role where there is already a pretty decent sized team, but they're also seeing things aren't working. Maybe it's because the close is taking 20 to 25 days, or the revenue team, like you said, is holding back on changing pricing because it's 6 months to implement. How do you go in and change both culture and systems for that new CFO that's stepping into somebody else's seat because the problems are existing?
One of the things that I've always done is, go in and take a fresh look at what are you doing, and almost like a small child, just keep asking why. The 5 whys go a long way. And there's a lot of times it's like, well, we've done this because, well, I don't know why we did it, or we did it this way because somebody did it this way, however many years ago. And look, I think you certainly want to have a respect for your history. And there are times when there are lots of things that are good. But I know I've gone into organizations, we've just said, you know what, we're going to stop doing a lot of these things. Really go through, and it's amazing. You can stop doing a whole lot of things and nothing happens. Nobody the sky doesn't fall. Nobody comes and says, why isn't this happening? I mean, I think you certainly do it with some, thought. It's not like, hey, we're just turning everything off. But you start going through and you ask, well, who's asking for this? Why are they asking for it? What are they using it for? When's the last time we made a decision with this? And you can start going through. And again, it becomes really an easy way to go through and say, all right, we're going to stop doing this. We're going to change this. Why do we need this information? I know my team comes to me a lot of times and it's like, I know you've asked me to put this and this together, but this takes me 20 hours a month to do. Do you really need it? And it's like, you know what? I don't need it. If I need something on it, I'll ask you for it later. But let's go ahead and do a more simplified version of that. Saves you a bunch of time. I think you got
I
to
love it.
encourage your teams to do that too. And one of the things I always do, and I think, this is especially as, you become a more senior leader, I think you have to be very careful with what you ask people. Because a lot of times, if I ask something, it's like, oh my goodness, you don't realize it can become an entire fire drill. And it was for a stat that I wanted to throw out. I was meeting with somebody, or I wanted to have it for a board meeting, but it wasn't super important. And you get horrified when you find out, the whole team worked all weekend to get you something that was a throwaway stat or just wasn't that important. And so one of the things I've learned to say is, look, sometimes I need to land on the aircraft carrier, and sometimes I'm just sailing across the ocean and I'm fine landing anywhere between Boston and Virginia. And I'll let people know. And I'll also say, if this is going to take you more than an hour, come back to me and tell me that, because there's sometimes, I know what I know, but I don't know what I don't know. And, it's really important to understand what your asks are and what type of overhead or what kind of fire drill you might be creating in the organization.
And the more senior you get, the more you have to be cautious of what comments and questions you ask because you can get these trails off of like, Todd asked this thing a long time. It's the most important thing. Drop what you're doing. And you're like, it's just a stat for a call. Like, I don't need this thing. So I totally get it and can sympathize and empathize.
Someone made a really good point to me. When you're leading an organization, think about it as being like a pole that's got 20 feet on each end. And you're just moving it like this right here. And it doesn't seem much. But at the end of that pole, it's waving way up. And you've really got to be thoughtful about that as you become a more senior leader, is because what is the impact it has at the end of that pole? And that has a huge impact on your whole organization. So really, like you said, being thoughtful on the questions that you ask or the information that you are asking people to get, because it really can, send either mixed signals or cause a ton of work that, nobody was anticipating.
Yeah, I think it leads to another sort of a interesting point, which is you're stepping into the role. How you position things and word things can have a dramatic impact, whether it's a offhanded comment or whether it's sort of a deep-seated question, especially when we're in a time where so much has changed. What's your advice for finance people who are coming in and wanting to move more to that, strategic role, but they need investment in technology? And, I think one way we go to finance teams and say, hey, I want budget for this thing is like, great, you're adding an expense line. Is there a way to position it that helps enable this to become a more strategic department versus just an increasing expense line? How do you sell the story internally for that transition to strategy?
I think finance leaders, we can learn a lot from the folks in product and go to market. Because if you think about it, everything that they're doing, it's an investment. And if you don't make that investment, there's a repercussion for that investment not being made. You hear this I hear this all the time. If we don't invest in this product, here's what happens to us competitive wise. Here's what happens to our product. Here's where maybe we, lose market share. The same thing with go to market. Finance isn't a whole lot different. If we're not investing in tools and technology that allow us to see the future or that allow us to enable these products that are coming out, well, then the company can't do anything with those investments that they made anyways. And, one of the examples that I gave someone recently is, you think about it. You would never think about rolling out a brand new product in a product category without a marketing budget. Well, why would we think that if we're going to have a whole new way to go to market, that we wouldn't have the technology and infrastructure behind it to be able to bill it and to recognize the revenue and manage that quote to cash process? So, just as you need to have an investment to bring a product to market and make sure that you have a product and you have a customer out there, you need to have that same infrastructure so you can actually transact the business and make sure you record it and report it right. And so I think we need to have that same level of sales and that same level of enthusiasm that some of our peers in the other functions have.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. What is it that gives you your sense of optimism?
I think one of the things that really makes me optimistic is when I think about when I started off in finance, the finance guy or gal came in and maybe gave an update on where they thought things were going to go. And then they told you what happened. And that was really about the extent of what CFOs did. They really reported the numbers. And now, almost in every case that I see, and I'm on a public board and I work with our board and our CEO, and the CEO and the CFO are usually the last two people in the room making the decision. And I think the reason that is they're usually the only two people in the organization that can see the whole organization. They see how all the pieces fit together. They understand when you put something in investment in here, how long it takes to get through the system. What are the different outputs? How does it go? They also are pretty good at modulating. Okay, well, maybe, this guy says it's going to take 6 months, but it's probably going to take 9 months for the product to come out. And, probably isn't going to have this much. You have certain abilities to kind of judge of where you think the acceptance of a product is going to be. And so you have a pretty good way to modulate and say, okay, this is probably a pretty reasonable way where this comes out. Maybe I'm being a little conservative. Maybe I'm leaning in a little bit, but you've kind of had a way to look at the whole system from front to back. And you're really having an impact on how the business is coming out and you're really helping drive it. And I think the fact that CFOs are really engaged at looking at the business and not just telling you what happened last month or last quarter, but they're telling you what's going to happen in the future. They're looking at the business. They got the facts on a day to day basis. And when they see things are going really well and you can put more wood on the fire to go faster, we're able to do that. Or at the same time, if you see you need to pivot, you help the business pivot. And so I think there's a lot of exciting things happening. And I'm really excited to be part of that. And I think that's one of the things that has really changed since I started my career.
What was it that attracted you to Zuora to go make a career change and start going there?
I think one of the things that I felt was I had always wanted to lead an entire finance function. I think it's different than leading, part of a big business unit. And the thing that was really exciting to me about, I have seen the challenges in multiple software companies of how hard the billing and that quote to cash process is. a really differentiated product. I felt it was somewhere I absolutely could make a difference. There was a CEO, and matter of fact, not only just the CEO, but our CRO, our product folks, they all had a desire to work really close together with me. And I thought it was a place where I could absolutely make a difference. I understood the product we were selling, the CFOs, CAOs, and I was used to where you be a showcase for your product. It was a really interesting opportunity, and it's been really a heck of a ride here. We've done a lot since I've been here. I think we've got a lot more that we can do. And so, every day I come in really energized about what the opportunities for us are, not only in the space, but with our company.
I'm sure you attend some sales calls, especially with big anchor clients or success enablement calls. What's the one or two things that your clients love the most about Zuora?
I think the things that I hear pretty consistently is the agility that we give the business. The second thing that I hear is that, look, they've got a single source of truth. They've got a way where they can understand what their deferred revenue looks like. They have a way to look at what things are going to look like in the future. And I think the last thing that they like is that it is in a controlled environment and that it makes their business much less manual. We've got everything automated. And, I take, for example, when we re implemented Zora, we were a public company at the time and we're able to get a pretty significant double digit decrease in our external audit fees because it made it that much easier for the auditors to take a look at revenue, which was one of our critical accounting matters. So I think there's a lot of value from an agility and automation and efficiency that we bring to our customers. And that's one of the things they really love about the product.
Got it. So if you have that finding in your audit, go check out Zuora.com. And if you just don't want to have that finding in the first place, go to Zuora.com now before you even have that audit. It sounds like a great product. I think July 15th today is when you are releasing this report, the Modern Finance Survey. Where can people find this if they want to learn more?
People can find it on our website, like you said, Zora.com.
Perfect. Cool. Todd, thank you so much for your time. This was great. Really appreciate it and keep up the good work.
Thanks, Sasha. It's been great to be with you.
Thanks for listening to Tech Finance with Puzzle and Turpentine. If you got value from this episode, please share it with anybody building or funding the future of technology. And please leave us a review wherever you're listening and tell me about what you want to hear more of. If you're looking for accounting software you'll actually love to power your company, check out puzzle.io, the modern accounting platform for the AI era. Tech Finance is part of Turpentine, the awesome podcast network behind Econ 102 with Noah Smith, Turpentine VC, Complex Systems with Patrick McKenzie, and so many more.